When you spend more than 20 years at a company, you get to see all of the ways that things change over the years, and you play a part in revolutionizing a company and sometimes an entire industry. That was the experience Norm Feldheim had while he was working at Qualcomm, and today he's helping to bring about a new kind of revolution. Today, Norm is the Senior Vice President, Chief Information Officer, and Head of Global Facilities at Illumina, which is a leading developer, manufacturer, and marketer of life science tools and integrated systems for large-scale analysis of genetic variation and function. Companies like 23andMe and Ancestry.com rely on Illumina to do DNA sequencing, and scientists and doctors all over are using Illumina technology in game-changing research. Norm explains how all of this is happening and what it means to be working on such important technology on this episode of IT Visionaries. Enjoy. IT Visionaries is created by the team at Mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform. This podcast is created by the team at Mission.org.
Welcome to another episode of IT Visionaries. I'm Ian Faison, Chief Content Officer here at Mission.org. And we have on the other line, Norm, what's going on?
Hey.
So today we're going to get into your background. We're going to talk about, what you all are working on at Illumina and much more. So first, how did you get into technology in the first place?
I actually got in sort of by chance. I was originally an architecture major in college, then changed to business management, and had to take a few computer programming classes. And something just clicked. I really enjoyed programming. It came naturally to me. I ended up changing my major to business information systems, then got a few jobs out of college programming. A few years after graduation, I ended up joining a little startup called Qualcomm as their first IT person within the company, and spent the next 28 years at Qualcomm, the last 17 of which as CIO.
Yeah, and I definitely want to kind of dive into some of those early Qualcomm stories. But first, so what's kind of the scope of your role at Illumina as SVP and CIO?
Well, I actually have two roles here at Illumina, but first and foremost is IT, and it's global IT. So everything from networks and infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, data centers, all the way up through business systems, analytics, AI. We also include cybersecurity. So I'm responsible for cybersecurity, both on the product side as well as business and intellectual property, company confidential information, personal information. So soup to nuts on the IT side. But in addition to that, I've also been responsible for global facilities here at Illumina. And that's been a fun thing to do because there was a lot of synergies, especially as we were building new campuses, to bring technology and our workplace together. So we've been able to really create what we call our workplace of the future, bringing technology into the workspaces, creating collaboration spaces that have embedded technology to enable collaboration for our employees. It's been a fun marriage of two disparate organizations.
Yeah, so pretty unique that you have the global head of facility role. That's not a common thing in IT.
That's correct.
Yeah, so why do you feel like that was important for you to have?
Even when I was at Qualcomm, I took on a number of disparate roles. I ran indirect procurement, I ran technical publications, I ran the PLM process, configuration management. They knew when I was interviewing that I could take on additional roles beyond just IT, and particularly roles where the organization was not performing as successfully as they would like it to. So I kind of had that skill set and reputation to be able to fix organizations and turn them into world-class organizations. So they said, hey, we've got this facilities organization. We think there's some synergy here. You have some background in facilities in the sense that I was an architecture major. My dad was a contractor, so I knew facilities from that standpoint. And it actually worked out far better than anybody expected, including myself. There was a lot more synergy. We were able to bring a lot of technology to bear on facilities to help our employees. That combination has been a very positive one for me personally, as well as for the company.
So for your IT roles, how do you look at, security versus product? How much time do you spend with customers? I know obviously in the type of company that this is, I'm sure you're not, sitting there with gene sequencing every day. But
no, that would be a really scary thought.
Indeed. But I am curious. How do you kind of break up the IT work in your organization?
So first and foremost, I focus on the organization. We're doing a lot of different things. We do about 120 projects a year. So there's no way that I can be in the middle of everything. And I have to have a very strong team. So we run a decentralized IT structure. We have alignment with the business, and I have dedicated teams to the business. And that's first and foremost, and making sure that team is rolling and performing at a high level is my primary responsibility, or one of my primary responsibilities. I certainly spend time on cybersecurity, but again, a little more on the focus on making sure the team is there, setting the strategy, and then letting them go execute. I tend to be, what I call an exception manager. I focus on the problems and things that need to get fixed versus spending a lot of time on the day-to-day operations. There are people that, within my organization that's their focus and they're good at it, and I just let them go. So my job is a lot of times, knocking down roadblocks, putting away, setting the strategy, dealing with issues as they come up. And then, as the business changes, doing those course corrections. Sometimes those are kind of immediate. Oh, wow, we're doing this customer right now, needs this, and we got to go react to that. And other times it's the longer term and laying out the technological roadmap for the company. No week is the same, that's for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. No week feels like it's ever the same. Do you find that, like, coming into the role after spending so much time at Qualcomm, like what was it about this role that was particularly like exciting or interesting to you? Being with the company for just under 20 years, I'm sure was something, a big jump was next. Why'd you do it?
Yeah, going from a long time at Qualcomm and coming here, it was interesting. When I was leaving Qualcomm, I made that decision. I was going through some interviews and looking at different opportunities. All of them were outside of tech. I must have had 20 different interviews, different companies, and not one of them was in tech, and not one of them was actually in California. And that was actually a goal of mine. I wanted something new, something of interest and challenge. And then Illumina popped up, and it's actually right down the street from Qualcomm, but it's a very different industry. They were high growth and just kind of starting off on their journey. I mean, it wasn't quite a startup. I mean, it was in place for a while, $2 billion. But the IT organization was still very nascent and a lot of outsourced. And they were looking for somebody that had been there, done that, and knew how to scale an IT organization up to $5-10 billion company level. So that was intriguing. And then genomics is, wow, I didn't know much about it, and it is fascinating. So those opportunities to come in and do something that I felt I was good at and could build up a strong IT team and knew how to do, as well as learn a new industry and a new company and a new culture. It was a great combination. And I felt like I could bring something to the table right away, but also a lot of learning too, right at the beginning. So it's been fun. Really enjoyed it.
Well, and for our listeners who don't know much about the company, can you kind of share from a high level, like what you all are working on?
Sure. What we're most famous for is the consumer side of genomics. So Ancestry.com, 23andMe, what are the technology underneath those platforms? We actually do the DNA sequencing, for those companies, or they use our technology to do that. And that's what we get a lot of perception around. But that's actually not the core of our business. The core of our business is doing whole genome sequencing, taking a person's DNA or any living thing's DNA and sequencing it, turning it into digital data that then can be analyzed. And we have companies that are doing research around DNA. So we have researchers, sometimes that's institutions. But we also sell into the medical industry, healthcare, labs, and hospitals and pharmaceutical companies that are using DNA to create personalized medicine, either as a service or as a drug regimen or treatment regimen. It's amazing, what people are able to do with the technology and the ability to sequence the DNA and then compare those results and make diagnoses and help with women who are pregnant and we're literally working to cure cancer or helping to cure cancer. The mission of the company is to improve human health through the power of genomics. It's a pretty powerful mission and something that's I'm proud to be part of. And it's actually happening. It's been fascinating to be part of.
Yeah, and what are some of the ways that kind of like you partner with business? Because I know that that's one of the things that a lot of CIOs particularly struggle with at times. But it seems like you've done a pretty good job of this. Is this something that you're providing insights to the business side, or do you kind of stay a little bit more away? I'm curious your approach.
It varies from group to group, and a lot of what I've needed to do here is create the platforms that the business uses. Where I'm not in the business of trying to do everything. I view IT as an enabler. So we have analytics capabilities within IT, but there's a lot of that within the business, and they use the platforms, the analytics platforms that we've created to do their own analytics. We've created an AI platforms, so they can leverage that. There's lots of ways that we're enabling the business, and then that's been a lot of fun. We have the business come to us and say, "Hey, here's the business problem we're trying to solve. Help us solve it," and we can apply technology to that. A lot of that is the fundamentals. We have processes that are broken. How can we help get those processes to be working more effectively, more efficiently? We have compliance obligations. We're a healthcare company. So how do we make sure that we're meeting all those compliance obligations in an effective and efficient manner? So IT gets pulled into lots of areas of the business, everything from our e-commerce site where we sell products to supporting our sales organization, field service. We're a manufacturing company. We build product. We do that in 4 different locations around the world. We do all the manufacturing systems and support those and implement those on behalf of the factory. Accounting, you name it, we're partnering with every aspect of the business to deliver technology so the business can scale and grow.
Switching gears to Qualcomm. So did you say you were the first IT person?
Yeah, there was only 100 people at the company when I joined it.
So what were early days looking like?
Early days were kind of crazy. We were actually a defense contractor when I joined the company. Then we became a satellite communications company to the trucking industry. And we really didn't have the systems in place at the time, really running the company on spreadsheets when I got there. I was chartered with putting together the ERP systems that they needed to run the company, run the factories that we were building all this equipment with. When I got there, they were in the process of implementing a system, and it was a failure. It really didn't work. It didn't work as advertised, certainly. So we needed to do something else, and I said, well, why don't we just we'll write our own ERP system. And I was really young and foolish and very naive, and I had no idea what I was signing up for. But we actually went and did that. We wrote our own ERP system, and we ran the company on that for the next 12 years. And it was a grueling project, 80, 90 hours a week for 15 months, but we pulled it off. I would never sign up for that. Knowing what I know today, I would never sign up for that. But at the time,
I was just going to ask.
I just thought, okay, yeah, we can do this, and somehow we did. I pulled together a really terrific team. I got the cooperation from the business, and it was really well received and worked very well for the company for many, many years. Later on, we outgrew that system and started implementing Oracle and other ERP systems and made acquisitions. And the company transitioned from a manufacturing company of communications equipment to cell phone manufacturer, base stations. And ultimately all that was sold off, and the company became a chip company and a technology licensing company. So I had to go through all those evolutions and create an IT organization that could support those transitions, business transitions and transformations that took place. And that was a lot of fun. It felt like I was at a number of different companies over the years because the business model changed so dramatically, and the systems had to change and the organization had to change. So I never felt like I just had one job there. I felt like I had many jobs just at the same company for a long time. So it was a lot of fun. I learned a tremendous amount. The company named me CIO in 1999. I was 40 years old, and they took a chance on me. It always worked out very well for me. I assume since they kept me there for 17 years that it worked out well for the company as well. We built a very, very strong IT organization. Very proud of the accomplishments we had there as a team.
When you run an IT org for that long, you're kind of like there for a bunch of different tech kind of innovation cycles. And I'm curious what that was like, because I'm sure there's a ton of our listeners who, obviously have not been, with the company that long and kind of seen that sort of thing progress. So I'm curious, like it seems like
I certainly wouldn't recommend it as a career option. It worked out well for me, but no, staying at one company that long is not a good idea. It certainly was a little bit of a damper on my resume when I was starting to look. There was some skepticism as to whether I would actually be able to succeed at another company after being at Qualcomm for so long. So I certainly don't recommend that for anyone, unless you happen to join a company like Qualcomm. But in terms of the business transformations and the technology transformations, there was I brought the internet into Qualcomm. That was weird to think about now because we take it for granted so much, but that didn't really exist. The early 90s, it came in later. So it was a lot of fun to bring those technologies, to watch those, and also be part of it. Qualcomm helped usher in the mobile device, mobile phone. So we were early adopters of our own technology. So we were deploying mobile phones and deploying applications to mobile phones, business applications to mobile phones in the early 2000s, well before any smartphones actually existed. It became a lot of fun to partner with the product development organization, the engineering organization, to actually try out some of these technologies that they were creating to enable mobile applications, video on phones for the first time, video conferencing on phones for the first time. Looking back, I didn't quite realize how revolutionary it was at the time, because it was just, okay, here's another project, we're going to go do it. And it kind of goes back to, well, it's in front of us, we'll just go do it. Without even realizing maybe how tough it really was to make that happen and how unique it was.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you hear a lot of CIOs talk about is when they come into the organization, that choosing what legacy thing that they're going to have to replace and kind of saying like, hey, I'm going to blame this on the old gal or the old guy. Mm-hmm. But when it's you who made those investments in technology, it's and you have to rip something out, kind of nobody to blame but yourself. I'm curious, did you ever have those kind of situations with leadership where they're like, you just bought that? Like, why are we ripping this out already?
There weren't too many situations like that. if there was, a situation like that, it usually was that the business had changed. And, so what we had was no longer able to do that job, not because it was a bad set of technology. It's just the requirements changed. The company, it was a innovation company, very technical. A lot of times they were driving the shift to new technologies, and they were viewing IT as, being able to enable that. So if something became obsolete for whatever reason, it was not that big a deal because they were more focused on the future than the past. There were a few exceptions where we bet on a company and a technology, and then they went belly up or got bought, and the company no longer invested in them, and we had to move off of those technologies. But it really, not as much of that was attributed to us. It's just things that happened in the business and in the industry, and people were aware of that and realistic around that. If I got dinged on things, it was more that I wasn't moving fast enough. I wasn't bringing in the new technology fast enough. They wanted to move at the speed of light. And, when you have compliance obligations and security obligations, and you have investments that are in place that, you have to integrate with, you can't always move at the pace of, hey, let's just go install this on my computer and be done with it. So that was more the pressure I faced at Qualcomm, was that high growth. And the company was growing 25% annually for 8 years in a row. Worrying about the legacy stuff was not as big a problem as keeping up with the growth and being able to support that growth and getting the right tools in place to do that. And the company was prepared to make those investments to support that growth.
Do you feel like kind of after that time, you were involved in other organizations, joining boards, doing things like that? Like, I'm curious, because you were able to stay at a company for so long, it seemed like you had a lot of opportunities to join different boards and things. I wonder, even though you're a one organization, if you kind of like diversified kind of the network personally by being able to be involved in so many other types of organizations. Because I think that that's something that if you're switching around companies a lot more, it might be potentially a little harder to keep up with a bunch of boards if you kind of have to continually kind of reinvent yourself in a new job. Just curious.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. And you hit on something that was a mistake that I made early on in my career. I was very internally focused and didn't really participate in networks of my peers or with the vendors beyond what we were doing at Qualcomm. And that actually turned out to be a mistake. I wasn't able to keep up with what was happening in the industry. I wasn't getting good ideas from my peers. And I needed to make a conscious effort to actually look outside and participate outside and build up my network. That was a very beneficial thing, not just for me personally, but for Qualcomm. I was able to learn about new technologies that then I could bring into Qualcomm. I was able to partner with our vendor partners, be on their advisory boards, and influence the product roadmap and in a positive way for Qualcomm, and make sure that those requirements, the business requirements, were being met by our partners as they invested in their products that we were using. So the investment was beneficial for me personally, but first and foremost, it was beneficial for Qualcomm. So those advisory boards that I was on were always with strategic partners of Qualcomm, whether they was Oracle or Verizon or AT&T or some other vendor, HP. These were our strategic partners. So it was worth the time for me to invest in that. And because we were doing a lot of innovative things, our partners were interested in having me and Qualcomm be a member of their advisory board because we could push them. We could say, here's what the future is going to look like. This is what you need to be prepared for. This is what you need to be able to be delivering to your customers in the future. So it was a mutually beneficial relationship. And through those advisory boards, I created a network of peers and then ultimately joined just some peer group, CIO peer group organizations, councils that were not vendor specific, but actually just us as CIOs, people that I respected and could learn from. And again, it was well worth my time and energy to get that advice and mentoring from my peers and good ideas. And hopefully I contributed some of that back.
So did you do things like customer advisory councils and things like that? Were you involved in those as well?
Mm-hmm. Very much so. In fact, I created some of those, helped. I was a charter member for several of them when these companies started to create them. I was, one of the first people that they asked to join. It was quite an honor.
Well, I'm kind of like curious when you were starting those versus like years later when you kind of saw the fruits of the labor. Because I think there's like when we talk to some CIOs, they've kind of thought about things like that, or they're trying to kind of figure out partner strategies and how to do those things, especially when you're like selling into IT and you're a CIO.
Yeah.
Because that can kind of be a tough relationship. But like, I'm curious looking back on it, years after setting those things up, were you ever like surprised kind of, maybe how hard it was getting going, but how fruitful they ended up being? Or I'm just curious, like looking back on those.
So mostly I wasn't setting them up. I was a participant. There was a vendor that was setting those up, one of our key partners. But I helped them with that and give them advice on what I thought would work and not work. Some of those suppliers did a good job with that. They created advisory boards that were high value for the people that participated, and I believe they were high value for the partner. Oracle early on had a very good advisory board. SAP, now I participate on the SAP one. It's a very high value advisory board. There have been others that I've been part of that were a lot less so. And, they weren't run well. The customers that they had participating were really not forward thinkers. They may be spending a lot of money, but they really were fast followers at best. So I wasn't learning anything. I don't think the companies were learning anything from those advisory boards, and I didn't stay on those. There wasn't anything that I was getting out of it, and certainly Qualcomm or now Illumina was getting out of those. So I was selective in which ones that I would join, and I didn't always stay on the same ones. So, for example, with Qualcomm, Sprint, Verizon, AT&T were all customers of ours, as well as suppliers. It was important for me to not be perceived as biased. So I spent time on Sprint's advisory board. I spent time on AT&T's. I spent time on Verizon's, so that I was contributing, as much as I could to the success of all our customers, not just one. And then we, partnered with them and worked with them all. So I didn't want them to feel like I was biased against them or biased towards one of them as a potential supplier.
I want to switch gears back to some of the amazing things that Illumina is doing. I'm curious. One of our producers bought 23andMe for a Christmas present, and with 23andMe and Ancestry and things like that, and you all being the underlying technology, I mean, it seems like it is such an exciting time for the future of just really understanding like who we are, which is so cool. But there's also kind of like some privacy concerns there and things like that.
Absolutely.
And I'm just curious, like these, the amount of data, the amount of access to this is like never before. How do you all view those sort of things?
So we take privacy very seriously. This is personal health information. There's nothing more private that can be more private. We need to make sure that we are protecting that information when we have it. We don't try and monetize this data. That's not our business model. We enable people to do, DNA research and they can do, analyze the data themselves, or they can use our tools to help them do that. But it's a tool that we, provide ultimately. And we want people to be able to take advantage of this technology. And we are seeing that in so many different ways. The power of it is incredible. There's a story from a few years ago. We were developing a instrument and a test to do help with genetic screening of babies, for pregnant women. And the standard practice has been an amniocentesis, drawing amniotic fluid out of the uterus and then testing that for the baby's DNA. That's a very high-risk procedure, both for the mom and for the baby. We developed a technique that can extract the baby's DNA out of the mother's bloodstream, so you can do the same test with then just a blood test. Obviously, a much less invasive test, and less risky for the mom and the baby. So that's a significant advancement. But while we were going through that testing process, the clinical trials, one mom that was part of that, we noticed an anomaly in the DNA. And at first they thought maybe there was something wrong with the baby, but the baby was fine. And then what they realized was they were actually detecting cancer DNA in the mom's bloodstream. And it turns out she had stage 4 colon cancer and didn't know it. She was in her late 30s, mid to late 30s. So we were able to tell her doctor that, and as soon as the baby was ready to be born, they induced labor, and she immediately went into chemotherapy, and she's alive today as a result of that. But that was crazy, amazing to think about. We could detect cancer in a blood test. And as a result, the company ended up, it was so big to be able to do that, to actually turn that into a real test. So we spun off a company called Grail, got funding from the Bill Gates Foundation, from some venture firms in Silicon Valley, Jeff Bezos at Amazon. And Grail is now well on the way to being able to detect cancer at stage 1.
That's incredible.
Using a blood test. I mean, it's still years, a number of years away, but they're actually being able to prove that the technology works and is able to detect cancer at least as effectively, and in some cases more effectively than tests that are readily available today. That's the kind of power of this. There's a drug company that has developed a cancer drug that is about 90-something% effective against a certain kind of cancer. But the only way to know if you have that particular type of cancer is to actually do a DNA sequence of the cancer. So we're now mirrored up with that drug company. You get cancer, you can get the cancer sequence, and then you will know whether this drug sequence will work for you or not. You don't have to go through chemo to actually find out whether the drug's going to be effective. That's kind of what happens today. They try out a drug, and if it doesn't work, they try out a different drug regimen, different chemotherapy. Personalized medicine is not just about your personal DNA, but it also extends, in this case, to the DNA of the cancer, being able to treat the specific cancer that you have, being able to detect if you have an infection, exactly what kind of infection you have, and making sure you get the right antibiotics to deal with that infection. We've got stories around that and where DNA sequencing has been effective in disease treatment. I mean, the stories just go on and on and on. It's incredible.
So what's next for the company? What does, and especially, for the IT organization, like how do you think about the employee experience and making sure that folks on your team can stay productive and keep up with technology and keep up with innovations when they're working on, some of the hardest things, most impactful things, in the world?
Since I've arrived here, 4 years ago, a lot of the focus has been on, laying in our digital foundation. Many of the systems were older. The company had evolved. So we've been upgrading our digital foundation or putting it in place. In some cases, it didn't even exist. So that's been our primary focus over the last 4 years. We'll essentially complete that in the middle of this coming year. So the shift is now towards being able to leverage those investments, turn to, become even more of a data-driven company than we already are, enabling analytics, using AI to gain more insights into that, process automation. We're looking at applying AI to our processes to look for opportunities for process improvement and process automation, RPA. But it starts with knowing what's going on in the company. And we want to use AI to map out all of what's happening at the company, from a process, and data flow perspective, and then be able to fine tune that, or in some cases, really clean it up if it's a broken process. We don't have, I think, too many of those, but we certainly have processes that we believe we can scale more effectively. So it's really that we're at an inflection point where we're shifting away from putting in all our platforms to leveraging all those investments and delivering more value and really creating a even greater employee experience and an even greater customer experience than we have today.
Okay, let's get into lightning round. These questions are fast and easy. Just like the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience, you can go to salesforce.com/platform to learn more. And I highly recommend all of our listeners go do that. Go check out Salesforce Customer 360 platform. Fast and easy lightning round questions. Norm, are you ready?
I am ready.
#1, what app are you using on your phone that is the most fun?
My quick reaction was Solitaire, but actually I think LinkedIn is what I'm on the most on my phone, besides email. I really enjoy the connections and the people I network with and learning about what they're doing and keeping in touch with them.
What is your favorite thing to cook or eat?
I'm going to go right back to a hamburger. I love hamburgers. I can't eat them like I used to. I have to be careful with that. But I love to cook them and try out different recipes. And I love experimenting with those at different restaurants too.
What do you do for fun?
I actually have a hobby that is 3D graphics and animation. So I try and do the same kind of things that you see in the movies with creating 3D characters, both cartoons as well as real life, or photo realism, whether that's designing and creating a 3D building or character or a science fiction or a superhero. I really enjoy that whole 3D modeling and being able to create art using my computer.
What technology are you most excited about going forward?
Oh, it's got to be AI. I mean, I've talked about genomics already, but AI from a pure IT perspective, what we're going to be able to do with that and the kinds of problems that we're going to be able to solve, I think is just amazing. And we've just touched on it so far.
What is your favorite vacation spot?
I love big cities, but if there's one place I'm always going to go back to, it's got to be Italy. I love Italy. It's just an amazing country to visit.
Do you have a favorite animal?
Dogs. I love my dog. We've had several dogs, and they're just such a part of our family.
What is your best advice for a first-time CIO?
Make sure that you are partnering with the business effectively, at all levels. You can't just focus exclusively on the exec team. You can't just focus exclusively kind of down at the rank and file. You have to work all levels of the organization to really get a sense of what's important to the organization, because you will get different messages and different requirements from different parts of the organization and at different levels. You have to be able to synthesize all those inputs, all those requirements into your IT strategy. Because if you miss one, you're going to be failing.
What question do you never get asked that you wish you were asked more often?
What's the right balance of investments in IT? We get sometimes so caught up with the short term, we got to have that this quarter. What is the right long-term investment for IT? What level of investment should we be putting into infrastructure, into security, into our business applications? What should we be, so making sure that those investments are balanced for the near-term business needs as well as the long-term business needs and across the IT organization. It's very easy to get either caught up in near-term and forget the long-term, or one area of the business and then other areas are underdeveloped or underfunded, underinvested in, and you ultimately end up with a problem.
Norm, that's it. That's all we got. That's it for today. Any final thoughts? Any things to plug?
No, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the conversation. I thought you did a great job. I love the questions that you asked. That was great. Really good job.
Well, appreciate it. And we definitely will have to have you back. This was great. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye now.
IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform.